Well, welcome everybody. Today we're gonna, this is our last of 6 sessions. And I think I warned you guys that we aren't covering all the things we'd like to talk about, but we wanna cover the most essential. We had taken the financial aid stuff off, but we're encouraged to put it back on for the prospective schools especially. So we're actually just gonna cover the Bonner Leader Program financial aid. If you're at a scholar school, there's a lot going on there, and that's a longer conversation anyway. But for the prospective schools, you may have gathered a whole bunch of questions during this time that we haven't given you time to ask. So I'm gonna throw out, maybe I'll email something I'll probably do a doodle actually and say, hey, people would like to have a follow-up just Q&A session where you can throw stuff at me and you can hear other people's questions who are looking at Bonner for the first time. We'll find a time for that. We'll probably just set aside an hour and just sort of see so we just make sure everybody gets all their questions answered. So, but we'll touch on financial aid real briefly. We're gonna touch on the need to set program expectations for your students clearly. I'm learning this summer that they like knowing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. So we're going to talk a little bit about that very briefly. We're going to talk about the web-based reporting system we set up. Again, we're not going to do this as this is how you learn you're not going to leave this meeting know how to do that. You're just going to know that it's there and the basic functions. Then we'll switch to somewhat more interesting stuff in terms of how people are making their program and their center more visible and give some examples of that. And we'll finish up with staying connected how we stay connected to one another on an ongoing basis and the kind of support the foundation can offer you guys. So that's what we're going to cover. So let me just touch on the financial aid first. And again, I'm talking about the Bonner Leader model. So the scholar model, the difference is, well, there's 2 differences. One is we provide the stipend, or the endowment that schools have provides the stipend. It started before work study made the requirement that some of the money go off campus. So we wanted to make that happen, so we provide that funding. The Scholar program also then requires schools to put all this other financial aid to make the maximum loan a student has to take out each year, maximum of $5,000 a year. So that means it's a really expensive program. Operationally, it's the same exact program. For the Leader program, we decided after a couple of years of letting schools do 2 and 3-year models, that it made more sense for us to collectively all have a 4-year model. We said the stipend for the student has to be the equivalent of work study. It doesn't have to actually come from federal work study. Some institutions have their own dollars they can put into it. And that also is important because some students will qualify for work study the first year, the second parent gets a job, then they don't qualify for work study the second year. We don't want you to have to kick them out of the program. So the school's commitment is really to support these students for all 4 years, where the work study level stipend for 8 to 10 hours a week. Under COVID, schools and we're encouraging them, and they're asking to lower the hour commitment a little bit just to deal with all that's going on. But 8 to 10 hours is kind of our standard. Again, it's all 4 years. It's this more intensive model, which we've been talking about. Some schools, actually many schools, provide some additional scholarship support. It's a named scholarship they already have. We encourage schools who are in the fundraising mode to get a named scholarship for students in your Bonner program and make that a big name and big billing and all that kind of stuff, and have Bonner be a kind of a smaller, it's a name. We want the name there because we think it's very important for the identity across the network for folks to have this common sense of being in the Bonner program. But students get all kinds of scholarships from all kinds of sources, and they ought to get that for their participation in this program as well. So we'll give you a couple examples of that. We don't provide funding for the summer. We don't really expect many schools will have the resources to provide summer stipends either. But you want to help the students find their summer placements anyway, because they generally want to keep doing that. So in terms of getting this going, it's either the first or second item on the checklist. I think it's the first, which is can you find the stipend? If you can't find the stipend, you can't have a honor program. So you got to go figure that out first. We give you some ideas on how to do that. This is where a longer conversation might be helpful, even individually with schools, because sometimes you have to negotiate it. You have to persuade an office that is either not taking this very seriously in terms of they take the meeting the federal requirements seriously, but they don't have any other intentionality around the community service work-study placements. If you're a public school, they often call the library a community service position because the public accesses the library. Same with the gym. So that's not really what we're trying to do. So that's one challenge. Another challenge is sometimes there actually is a staff person who that don't provide any training or any developmental frameworks or anything of the stuff we're talking about. They still manage the community service work study as a part of what they do. And they love it. And they're reluctant to give it up to you guys. And so sometimes it's a political issue, personnel political issue around that. We have one school that's been wanting to do it for years, but the boss of that person doesn't want to take it away from that staff person. So they literally have not been able to change that. At the College of New Jersey, they made this a half and full tuition scholarship. Somewhere it's between those two. And because of that large scholarship amount, tuition scholarship, because of that, they're actually not using work study. So that's the very unusual exception to the rule. There are a couple schools that package their students, they're wealthy enough schools, as if they're honor scholars. They've seen our guidelines and they give them all this aid. That's not the expectation. The minimum expectation is the work study eligible stipend, and often comes from work study. The other thing here to mention is the employment the students have should ideally be with your center or with your office. That would then free them up to go serve anywhere they want and change their minds and do different things. It also frees up the community partner for having to come up with a 25% match. So when it's in your center, you've got to manage the match component too. But that gives you all the flexibility and that the Bonner program kind of requires. And that's an extra cost. So that's something to keep in mind as you look at this. So I think most of you by now know that there's a 7% requirement. Many schools do 10, 15, even 20%, schools that are heavily committed to this kind of work. I have a database of the federal grant for most of the school, all the schools. It's like 3 or 4 years old, but it's still actually, they don't change that much year to year. So when schools call me, I often go there first and say, well, how much would you have out of that if you spent 10% or 15%? So when we did this survey, a couple programs just had the $2,500 stipend, somewhere in that ballpark. Some had a little bit higher, 25 to 3,000. So this has to do with the hourly rate for the schools, what their hourly rate for their Bonner program, for their Bonner leader, for their work study is. If it's college work study, they can do whatever they want. And with federal work study, you have actually a fair amount of discretion there. So you can see, this is a couple-year-old survey. You can see there's actually quite a range across the schools. This becomes an issue because 8 to 10 hours a week over a full semester, we normally don't include exam week. So if it's a traditional 15-week semester, it's usually a 14-week time frame. There may not be enough dollars to go that far for as many students as you want. So this becomes a major stumbling block. But the other thing we've got is some schools are doing additional scholarships. So these numbers may have changed, and I'm giving you we're giving you the tuition just to give you some benchmark there. But you can see how they've done it. So Montclair State's a public school, just do the Chapel Hill is, or Sinus, it's a tuition discount, a little bit larger now. Washington Lee, it includes a summer award. And they're a higher tuition school. So there's a mix of things. So let me just pause there and say, what other questions do you have? Briefly or not so briefly on this. In the room, the virtual room, the only scholar program is Val, right, Val? Yeah.
We're a scholar program.
Yeah.
So the leader, what you just went over, is very confusing to me.
Yeah, you're fortunate. You don't have to worry about it. It's you know, what Bonner's done is leverage the financial aid to give students not just access to the opportunity to go to college. That's what the school's really responsible for. But it's sort of an equity of opportunity to do this kind of thing. If the jobs have to be on campus, if they have to be at the library or the dining hall, or I did dorm crew, you know, then students aren't getting the full set of possibilities. And they certainly don't have the time, if they have another job off campus, in addition to that, or to do leadership programming or do this kind of intensive work. So part of the pitch to the school is this is an access program that the school, and the schools care about that. This is a diversity and inclusion program. And more schools care about that. And as the demographics become more diverse, this is a retention program, a student success program. It's probably the best one out there, but it's certainly one of the best ones. It's also a leadership program, although we don't frame it that way specifically. There's a first gen program. There's a lot of ways to sort of look at the way the school is looking at their student population, their recruiting, their retention, their priorities. You got to dig into the strategic plan. You've got to listen to what the president says in their speeches. You've got to go introduce yourself to the financial aid office and the enrollment office, you know, the admissions office. You have to introduce yourself to the student success folks on campus. At the bigger publics, I know in New Jersey, they have EOP, Economic Opportunity Programs. So they have these state-funded programs for generally lower income students. And this program fits all of those. What's interesting about it is it's not named that way. It's not marketed or actually perceived by the students in it as being primarily about their demographic status, their race, ethnicity, their income, their first gen, those kinds of things. It's not about that. It's about their commitments, you know, those 6 common commitments we talk about. It's about that stuff. And so as they get recruited, as they read the marketing material, as they fill out the application, it's all about, do you want to change the world? Do you want to make these things happen? When they show up on campus early, who are they showing up with? The athletes, right? They're in the dorms early. Some schools give the students, like they do with athletes, first dibs on enrolling in courses. So there's no wonder that these students are proud of themselves and sort of walk around campus that they own it pretty quickly, because they do. So if you think about pitching this to the different audiences to get access to those resources, both scholarship dollars as well as work study, federal college, you've got to tap into those set of questions. And if you have a long-standing program, it's still always, there's always, particularly now, but I mean, even without the COVID stuff, there's always sort of a new administrator, a new president, a new dean, a new admissions person who will look at this program and say, that's kind of expensive. Is that really worth it? And they haven't met your students. They haven't met you, and you're all very charming. So there's that, but they haven't experienced it yet, right? They haven't seen it. And so one of your jobs with even a long-established program, I know Arlette's dealing with this. Now, we're dealing with it at a particular moment in time, so I get that. But even in this moment in time, I think it's really critical for folks to connect this program, and this is the best of what higher ed's about. And it touches absolutely every single one of your mission statements. Core. And then your strategic direction, most likely. And so this is the kind of thing that shouldn't be cut when they're cutting, or shouldn't be cut as much compared to other things, because it's also a story the school has to tell itself, its own internal constituency, the local partners, obviously alumni and other folks. We're still alive and well. We're still out there doing what our mission statement is all about. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff there that is more than just the numbers around financial aid for you guys to keep in mind. because that's the story, right? And when we talk about visibility and marketing and that kind of stuff here in a minute, it all ties back, right? So just keep that in mind as you go. Jennifer, since you applied to be a Bonner, and what was when you read the application material, and like, what were you thinking? And it's okay if a big part of your thinking was, boy, that's a great financial aid package, because we want that. I'm not trying to, you shouldn't shy away from that. But so in addition to that, what were you seeing?
Yeah, I think from what I remember, I honestly didn't even realize how much of a financial help it was going to be. It was more of, I was told by one of my mentors at the time, you really need to apply to this program because you're already doing the work in high school, so this is just a transition to continuing that work in college. But more importantly, to get to know Greensboro as a city where Guilford is located, which is the school I graduated from, to learn and understand like what's actually happening in Greensboro. I think that's what I was really attracted to, is just how we literally broke pieces apart to actually learn what's happening behind scenes and what's not being talked about. But also, I think a lot of self-growth was mentioned to me, even during the interview that I had, just how much you would learn and take out of the program, what's being inside.
Yeah. Emily? Just when you applied to Center, what was it? What were you hearing? What appealed to you?
Yeah, so Center is in Danville, Kentucky, which is actually my hometown. So there was such a draw to belonging in a community that was also like the community that I grew up in. All similar to Jennifer, I was aware of the financial aspect of it, and in fact, it is what allowed me to go to Center, to stay there. So I mean, it was still a big issue, but it was just the sense of community, giving back to my own hometown, and yeah.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
So do you have any schools that have a scholars and a leader?
Yes.
Program?
Yep.
So Valerie, I see you saying, yeah. Does DePauw?
Yeah, but no, DePauw doesn't have both, but Allegheny, Center, and Stetson are both.
So on my screen, Clarence, Emily, who just spoke, has one. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit, how that felt to have both financial aid models on the same campus.
Yeah, I'm again kind of like pulling back into the archives. We were all still treated, and I think that's what is important if you do have both scholars and leaders, is that you're treating them all the same, because they all should be the same, the biggest difference being the financial package. So I think we were aware of who was a scholar versus who was a leader, but that again, that had to do more with your individual financial package. So
yeah, I can definitely add to that. I'm actually a coordinator here at Allegheny. It was interesting and new to me because Guilford was a strictly scholar school, and having to figure out what that meant as a scholar and leader school. Definitely always treating everyone the same way, no matter if they're a scholar or leader. We actually call them all by the overarching title is a Bonner Service Leader. And then no one within our program knows, unless they disclose themselves, who is what, who's a scholar, who's a leader. That's on their own if they want to share that with their own Bonner mates. But other than that, everyone's treated the same.
Okay.
And
wasn't sure if there were, any dual models out there, but that's good to hear, because the program that we currently have, covers the majority of, our students' tuition. And, we're looking to hopefully move towards a scholar model. And then, or at least I would hope that we move towards a scholar model, and then, potentially add a leader model to expand the program.
Yeah. Yeah, Clarence, I mean, your new president's been around Bonner for quite a while, so he hasn't been in a school with a scholar program, but he's aware of the structure of the financial aid.
Right.
And, at a national level, we really refer to it now as the Bonner program. And we only really bring up leader scholar when we're trying to make a point around the financial aid difference. Otherwise, I shy away from sort of emphasizing scholar leader. And interestingly, we haven't sort of insisted that all the schools use the label exactly Bonner Leader Program.
Mm-hmm.
Bonner's in the name, but some call it Bonner, like a leader program calls it the Bonner Community Scholars. And to me, it's like, why argue about that? That's a perfectly fine name. I don't care. Right. The Bonner part's important because the identity, right? They can feel like they're in this Bonner thing. So that's how, so it works. Look, everybody's doing the same amount of intensive work. And if they keep showing up and they keep doing it, people notice that. And that's where they get this sensation of, where's all that Bonner love stuff comes from,
right.
The beloved community.
Well, can I ask one more question?
Of course.
So in the current program model that we have a number of service hours that the students must complete as well during the summer and the semester. And earlier on, you mentioned that, obviously community service is a large part of the program and how it delves into one's own financial package with work study. My question is specifically, here at Albion, we have already made the decision that no in-person service will be allowed once students make it back to campus. How does that affect?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Program?
So everybody in the country who does this kind of work is wrestling with this. The way we have wrestled with it, is that if the partners aren't able, the partners you normally work with aren't able to have the students do remotely what they did before. Mm-hmm. So I think there are arguably possibilities to do after-school homework help. But the public schools are they're struggling so much just to figure out what they're going to do that you're not very high on their list of problems of kind of things to solve. But that'll shift, I think, at some point. And so some of those things, there's some areas where I think what students were doing before, similar kind of what we think of as direct service, a version of that can be done remotely. The other thing we've been talking to schools about, two other things. One is what we've loosely called capacity building. So in the nonprofit sector, people talk, it's actually a label that's pretty common now. And funders will fund organizational capacity building. So it's building your website. It's doing some research for you. We just actually updated a form. We're in the process of updating a form, but we shared some of that on the community partnership stuff. Most of those things can be done remotely if you can get it launched. Now, getting it launched goes back to the partners are a little bit overwhelmed, and taking on a consultant to do a project, even if it's a really good project, is not very high on the list either right now. So there's a timing question as opposed to kind of it's not completely about, I won't ever be interested in that. I can't take that on now. Because there is, in the end, some time they have to invest with those students. Not necessarily a ton, but there's some. So, but nevertheless, that conversation we were encouraging schools, and schools have been having those kind of conversations to do that kind of remote capacity building service, which is not the same as client service, not working with kids or organizing the food drive. It's sort of more operational, either at a program level or the organizational level. The third idea, which is again more capacity building, is to help the center, the Bonner program or your campus-wide center. And we're calling those in-reach. And the only in-reach we've allowed up till now has been if you're a Bonner senior intern, which sometimes, by the way, are juniors. But if you're a senior intern and are helping, you're like a junior staff person. Or If some of your time might be a Bonner leadership team, you're helping sort of lead the program itself. You're leading class-based meetings. And so some of your time, not a huge percentage of your time, but some of your time is doing that. Now we're saying in-reach actually could be your major placement. It could be the thing you do. So in this case, Clarence, you're the boss. You're the supervisor. And frankly, you have the same problem a lot of these nonprofits have, which is you don't have a lot of time, bandwidth to manage and support a whole bunch of students to do in-reach for you, even if you want the work to be done. So this is the trick of how do we even create those in-reach opportunities. And we've got on our website, we have quite a few laid out. I'll just quickly show you those if I can find my Safari. Here we go. By the way, this project here, doing policy research, is it's sort of a cross between in-reach and outreach. So that's a cousin project that you could think about doing. Oops, wrong thing. So on the Bonner Wiki, right here at the top, resources for the coronavirus response. And this whole page is about the response. So this, Clarence, I would just encourage you to go look at this page. But on here, you'll see some of our sharing platforms, more stuff we'll talk about at the end here. The kind of projects you may be able to do with partners, but again, emphasizes capacity building. And then the whole in-reach here. And then other stuff we have to think about as well in terms of training and enrichment in a remote fashion. But the in-reach includes things, update and refine the operations manual for your Bonner leadership team, your Bonner handbook, which we'll talk about in a second. Do assessment efforts and get feedback, data collection of various kinds. Develop the training calendar for the coming school year. I mean, even this school year. But partner placement, project development. So you're not gonna be able to place them this fall, but maybe we can this spring. And some of those could be capacity building projects. So what kind of project might you help develop? Now with partners, you have a longer on-ramp. Help with the annual report, which we'll talk about in a second. Maybe there's some fundraising research and planning, maybe working with your development office, recruiting and retention, or recruiting and selection. You gotta, even now, it's too early now to think about next school year, fall 21 for recruiting. But if you're a brand new school, like you are, you ought to be getting 2 or 3, 4 senior interns, but I would actually do sophomores or juniors so they're here in the following year. Get them to start working with you on all the Bonner startup stuff. That's an in-reach project. Help with social media and a website. The alumni ambassadors is another, it's its own category, but it's also a form of in-reach. And we have 20,000 alumni, and most of our schools don't have much of an alumni structure for their Bonner program. So we're working with schools to do that. So that just gives you the kind of thing that we're looking at in this moment. So that we could come out of this, when we come out of this, we're actually in these areas much stronger than when we entered into it. Things that are very important to do, but it's just never enough staff time to do it. So basically bring your Bonners in as staff and put, set them loose on a lot of that material.
Well, thank you all. I appreciate you, taking time to answer my questions.
No, those are very good questions. So let me pick up, if you've got more questions, it looks like the people are doing in the chat. If you have more questions, please by all means jump to the chat. So expectations. Rachita, I can't tell if you're supposed to do this or I'm supposed to do this.
I can go ahead.
Go ahead.
So yeah, as Liz mentioned in earlier session and Bobby mentioned that it's very helpful for students to know what they are getting into, what their roles will be. So you can set clear expectations around service requirement, how to maintain and build community partnerships. They will need to also participate in education and training meetings. And you can do all these things in a variety of ways. So the first one is orientation. And this is the first introduction to the program for Bonner students where they get that sense of community. So orientation sessions are very crucial to communicate all these expectations. And other way to do is handbook. I'll show you 1 or 2 samples later on. And then one-on-one advising is also very helpful in terms of relationship building. As a Bonner program coordinator or director, you can set up one-on-one meeting with Bonner students. And of course, ongoing throughout the year, There are skill building activities, community building activities during which you continue communicating those expectations. So in the next slide, there is an example. And I'm also going to share a link to Bonner Wiki page where there are other examples of handbooks. But in a handbook, these are the things that you cover: history of the program, what are the common commitments, student development model, what code of conduct is expected from them, if they have to take a leave from the program for a semester or so, what are the rules that they should follow, GPA requirements, all that information can be included in the handbook. So yeah, this is just what I mentioned, one-on-one meetings. So because especially first-year students will be very new to this whole program, so it's good to go over community learning agreement. If you are using BWBRS, you could do it over there, or you could have the printed document and explain it to them. Bobby, do you want to add anything about this?
Yeah, on the advising, it's probably the single smartest thing you do in terms of investment of time. You can't know what's going on in everybody's head. And you've got 30, 40, 80, whatever the number is, students, just through group meetings. You have no idea. Now, the investment of time is significant. And, when you get to a bigger program, you actually have to recruit a team of people to do it. But it's absolutely completely worth it. You gotta, you set aside half an hour minimum once a semester to meet with every one of your Bonners. Have somebody on staff meet with every one of your Bonners. And if you do that, then you have a really good bead of what's happening. The handbook, all these sort of expectations, for most of the students, it's just great. I know what I'm expected to do. I'm going to do that. You have to have some of those clauses in there around, but then they fall short how you handle it. You want to spell that out as clearly as possible. You want to look at other people's handbooks just to get an idea of how they've handled it, because that is going to happen every now and then. And when it does, you're going to really regret not having some clear process stuff in there. But the one-on-one, I just can't emphasize enough. It's absolutely a best practice. It's something we really, I think it's even in the Bonner rules as an expectation that you do that. But it's a lot of work. So understand that. You may have to recruit people even outside your office. If your center's not big enough, recruit some really close family, family friend, people on your advisory board or something else to maybe participate in some of that. But keep that in mind as you go through this. I'm going to shift gears for a second and talk a bit about our web-based tracking system. We set this up years ago, many years ago, because schools did not have, we asked schools to give us list of where the students were serving, how many hours, percentage by issue area. And they just looked at it like, are you crazy? So we created this system, and then we had a AmeriCorps program for many years. And so we had to add all this stuff to the system to manage AmeriCorps, which, has anybody managed AmeriCorps before? Put your hands up. Emily has. Yeah. Was anybody in AmeriCorps before? All right. We have no idea what a hassle it is. So we had to create all these systems for that. And they always made it harder and harder, so to the point where we finally had to drop the National AmeriCorps program. We kept our New Jersey one. So this system is not perfect. We're 2 years into trying to get it overhauled. We're not there yet. But it has things like the community learning agreement, which we mentioned before, I believe, on the community partnerships, where the student signs it, the partner signs it, and you sign it. This is for their primary service placement. It's a place where they track their hours. There is a sense at different times at different schools where, do we really have to keep track of hours? That seems so antithetical to the nature of our work. Shouldn't we, if we're doing project-based work, can't we just judge the project? And my view on that is, lawyers track their hours, consultants track their hours, lots of people track their hours in a professional setting. It doesn't mean they do less good work or less committed to the work. And I think when we don't have some mechanism for this kind of accountability, it's a very slippery slope. And there's lots of time pressures on these students, and they slip down that slope very fast. if you're in the scholar program, there's an enormous amount of financial aid invested in you. And I think the expectation that you live up to that is well worth keeping track of. In a leader program, it will vary, but it's still something, if it's federal money, they have to know you're doing it. So there's already an expectation of tracking there anyway. You know, you want to think about policies for folks who fall behind. You want to have some check-ins during the, you know, benchmarks. You ought to be roughly here by now and roughly here by this month or this week. And that'll give you early warning to track people down. The system itself is perfectly simple to use. It's just not as elegant as it could be. And I'm not going to go through all the slides, partly because we don't have time, but partly because it's kind of boring, you know, and I can bore you another time. We have very good step-by-step guides on our website, includes even some videos. So it's not hard to get people up and running on it. As I said, if you have a different system, we want you to use that. Now, what's not boring is what students have to say about doing their hours. And if you've never seen this video, I should be able to click this screen and it should just start playing. This was done by some Bonners for their program, and they shared it with us. It's Stuff Bonners Say. Let's see. All right, I'm gonna have to open it over somewhere else. Stop my share, hold on a second.
Or you could use it in a play mode and then it should work.
Oh, okay, let me do that then. Thank you, Rachita. Play mode.
I just love it.
All right.
Share your screen.
Yeah, I have to go find it. Thank you for telling me. Share my screen. Stuff Bonners Say. Here's the guy. I never met this student either, which I wish I had. The star of the show.
I just love fair trade coffee. How do you use Bonner Wiki? Wait, our hours are due today? Gandhi is so inspirational. I am so excited for MLK Day. When do our disbursement checks come in? We're not a cult. Actually, we're a cult. This is a safe space. Can we change the time of the weekly meeting? I just want to change the world. I wish all Christians were like Shane Claiborne. It's Bonners with 2 N's. Oh my gosh, I love working with kids. Those kids are driving me crazy. Sometimes I just want to be nature. Hey, are you gonna recycle that? It's pronounced Bonners. Are you AmeriCorps? I think I did a workshop on that once. I have so many hours left. All you need is love. Will this count for Bonner hours? Does this count for hours? Does this count for hours? Do I get hours for this? Does that count for hours? Oh my gosh, I love reflection time. I hate reflection time. Where's your service site? Sometimes I ask myself, what would Mother Teresa do? Oh my gosh, I love being with my Bonners. I really want to work at the foundation because Kelly works there.
Oh, God. I literally think that's the funniest video. And Val, that captures it, doesn't it?
Bobby, I feel like every student that I've gone through has been in this video.
And Kelly was a staff person at the foundation. And Shane Claiborne was, I think, a staff or faculty member at one of the schools that they, anyway.
Is it Kelly Finn?
What's that?
Kelly Finn?
Kelly, yeah, no, Kelly Barrett.
Oh,
Kelly Barrett. Okay.
And that, just so you know, that video is 8 years old. So it's basically timeless. That won't change. So that gives you a good feel for what you're going to be up against when you start asking students to do all these important things. Let me get out of this. And Rachita, I can't remember it yet, but I think you're supposed to do the visibility piece.
yes.
All right, take it away.
Some of you already shared on Bonner Learning Community that you use your city's newspaper or school newspaper to highlight the program. Are there any other ways that you are doing it? If you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was the one that responded and said that we use our city newspaper specifically to highlight our program. It's not the Bonner program yet, but we use our city newspaper And they also use neighboring cities' newspapers to highlight the program. We use the college's newspaper, and we also use other college publications. So when our first cohort graduated, Albion sends out what is called the Albion Yell to all alumni. It goes out every year, a couple times a year, and they were specifically highlighted in that publication, and that goes nationally and internationally. So that's just something that we do here at Albion.
Thanks. Yeah, that's helpful. Any other school? What are you doing to highlight your program achievements? Okay.
I put mine in the chat, Rachaita.
Oh, you did. Okay. Oh, yeah. The college's newspaper, right?
Yes, the newspaper is really important to us, and also all the social media platforms. They've done campaigns about food recovery. They've done campaigns about composting on campus and things like that on social media.
Great.
I think the interesting question here is, do you think your program's well enough known, right? So despite what you're doing, do you think that people really understand it? Are there, what are the other ways we want to sort of make that come across? And so some of the stuff we're going to see here has to do sort of some of the best of what that's happened in the Bonner Network in terms of some of that sharing.
One thing I do want to add is that we ask our students to add in their signature line that they are Bonner leader. So almost like a title. So every time they send an email to a professor, to a peer, they'll know that they are Bonner leader class of, and then the class year. And that's been really, really helpful to let people know that they're part of this larger network. Just an advice.
That's totally smart to do.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. So some other schools also use a lot of social media these days, and they take help of Bonner senior interns, and they use Instagram, and then they tag Bonner program to that. So that's one way of highlighting different events that are happening and program achievements. And then annual report is one way to do it. Some schools have used 5-year anniversary or 10-year anniversary reports, and all these examples are available on Bonner Wiki, and you will see that they use lots of pictures, very visually appealing graphics, and they include information of all the Bonner students over the years, all the events that have taken place. So annual report is one way of doing it. Then another one is counting community engagement. So Bobby, you have this amazing graphics. I would like you to explain it. And then of course your Bonner website.
Yeah, I talked about this the other day. It's just, I think we can do a much better job describing the substance of what students are doing, categorize the types of things, and maybe have some subcategories there. We need to do that job at a national level to help be a better example. This is just a total fake one little chart here, but it's trying to convey that notion. And you're right, Richard, that the web, it's interesting to see how hard it is or easy it is to find the Bonner program on the websites. We go look. They're usually pretty easy at this stage to find. If you know you're looking for them, if you just type in Bonner. If you don't know you're looking for them, the interesting question is, how hard is it to find your center? And how far is it to find Bonner?
Yeah.
Is it in the admissions office page? Is it in the financial aid page? That kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to emphasize, that many students will also go on financial aid office page. So it is good to connect with your financial aid office and make sure that Bonner program is listed there.
Yep. We just updated these, so these are more current ones. By the way, I won't get sidetracked. And you can see here, so this is Siena College. There's among the centers and institutes is one for this academic community engagement. Within there's the Bonner program. It's one of many programs. The goal here is not to make the Bonner program more important than the other things you're doing. It's just to make it findable, let people see it. And one of the things we hear a lot is, particularly in the scholar program, where I think the financial aid becomes something that people really wish they would have known about, is they find out they didn't hear about it. It's not, I think if you have a Bonner program with financial aid, attached to financial aid, which you will, then there ought to be a link in the work study page somewhere. There ought to be a link in financial aid somewhere. There ought to be a link somewhere in the admissions process. It just ought to be, right? So it ought to be, and there ought to be there. Part of the argument is selfish for you guys, right? You want the best students, you want the most students to apply so you can choose the strongest. The other reason though is this is what part of the pitch is, it signals to any student that's applying to the school what the school cares about. These kinds of things are available. They can't become a Bonner. They know there's other kinds of things they can get involved in. So it's not only a selfish thing for you guys to be advocating for this, a presence on these other pages. Now, once they get the link, you want what they come arrive and look at to convey the richness of the program. It is not easy to do. This program is very hard to really convey to folks. This is our 6th 90-minute session with you guys, and you probably have a feel for it now. But if you're new, you won't really know until you start having these Bonners show up. My argument for starting the program before you're all ready, rather than on your mark, get set, go, on your mark, go, get set, is you don't really know how to run it until you start running it. And you only bring a freshman class in anyway, so it's not easy, but that's how you have to phase it in anyway. So you're not going to start with 60 Bonners, you're going to start with 15 if you're a 60 student program. So, but the point is, you can't really understand it until you start doing it. I think it's hard to convey it. There are some really good videos that schools have done that we've linked to in our wiki that they use in the admissions pages. Stetson did one recently. They have Scholar and Leader, by the way. There's some other ones out there. Some of them are done by Bonners themselves. One of my favorite was done by folks at Augsburg College in Minnesota. And that was really conveying the program. And if we have time, I'll go look for it. I think we may have a little time to play that one. It's quite short, but it really conveys something very powerful about the nature of the program without getting into all the nitty-gritty details. Okay, so go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Sam?
Also, I think one of the issues, well, not necessarily a big problem, but it's something that comes up is, since at the College of New Jersey, all first years have to go out in the community as part of a community engaged learning process. A lot of times what ends up happening is they identified those group as Bonners because if they drive in our vans and our vans say Bonner on them. So we do have an intentional branding campaign that's probably going to start happening soon to try to separate those two so people can know more about exactly what the Bonner model is and who's a Bonner student and program. So in the session earlier this morning, I think they referred to the Bonner leadership team to be part of an outreach committee. I'm definitely going to be implementing that one because I think it's a great resource. Yeah,
the branding thing is interesting, right? So there's a good reason to have Bonner. When you get an endowment, many of the schools called the center, they changed the name of the center to Bonner. And that can be really positive. University of Richmond's the Bonner Center for Civic Engagement. But there is then this question of, you have to break through. It takes a while actually to have everybody understand this isn't just for this one group of students. The good news is the reputation of this group of students is so positive, it rebounds well to that larger identity. So if you've got Bonner on the side of a van, then you're going to have that problem as well. Mm-hmm. So it's a tricky thing, right? The other thing is we were sort of say we never wanted the program to be perceived as this elite group, right? This special. Actually, when we were having those conversations, it was way back when Saddam Hussein had the elite Red Guard. Now, some of you would remember that. And we would say, we don't want to be the elite Red Guard, right? We didn't want to be this sort of, so it's a trick, right? How do you have it be important and have a lot of pride without having to become arrogant? Now, I think it's because the nature of the work solves that problem for us. And these guys do so much of it. After a while, whatever they may have come in with gets where they think they're more special or whatever. Now they do know that they do more. That quote I gave earlier about we don't want to be like all those other leadership programs. They do have that sense of being special. But I think in terms of inviting lots more people in, I think that's kind of what Sam's getting at, and figuring out ways of doing that is important, and not having. I even think sometimes when you celebrate the great things Bonners are doing, when you talk to administrators and things, I think what you can talk about is these are students at Notre Dame of Maryland University, right? If you always start with these are Bonners, the Bonner becomes almost more important than the school. And I think a lot of those administrators want to think about the school. These are Wagner students doing this great work. Look at these Wagner, look what they're doing out there. And I think that's important as we sort of, particularly right now, right? If your students are doing more than almost anybody else because they have this special structure and expectation, as you start getting them into the press and try to get the school to highlight what they're doing, I think it's very important for them to highlight as this is what the institution, students at this institution are doing, who happen to be in the Bonner program. So it's a subtle thing, but I think it's worth keeping that in mind because the messaging in the end is more than just this group of students. And you should know, we spend half our time on campus-wide efforts. From the day one, the goals were always campus-wide, not just for these students. From day one. And even the conception of the program, that was the case. And I know that, I wasn't here, but I know Wayne, and I found some pieces of paper that show that.
Sure.
I'm just gonna talk a little bit about some of the stuff the foundation does, and I'm gonna have Rachita walk through the various resources. So from a support standpoint, we do a bunch of different things. We will do a lot of stuff to help you with startup if you're brand new. We do, program development work with you. Whether we're building these systems or developing resources, some of these are about sort of if we come visit with you guys, what kind of things would we do when we visit? So we can, an alignment visit, that's code for Bobby's got to talk to your president or somebody because you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Or the schools thinks this is too expensive and therefore Bobby's got to go have this conversation. I've been having quite a few alignment conversations lately, mostly because of the crisis, not because of any wishful part on the schools to not be engaged. People, in fact, I'm overdue to do a short video welcome for at least one program. I'm trying to do something clever, but once I say that to myself, then I struggle with what would be clever in a 60-second video. But but we will go to orientations virtually these days. We've gone to orientations otherwise. We don't do a lot of orientation visits because there's not much else you can do other than talk a little bit there. We do a lot of campus visits when we're able to. I think under these circumstances, we've been, over the spring, I've had a lot of conversations with senior administrators when talk about prospective schools. You should feel very comfortable saying, hey, I found a group of folks, they'd love to hear more directly from you and ask you some questions. Can we set up a Zoom call and, do it that way? Those actually work very well. I've been very pleased with that in terms of the effort to impact of that kind of stuff. We have done, and we will do again in the future, more strategic planning kind of help. Again, this may be something we can do in a more staggered way, not get people holed up for a day and a half. That's going to be very hard to do online. But how do you get people to sort of do a strategic planning process over a number of weeks or months where we could play a role in helping facilitate certain parts of that conversation with you at your request and help you think that stuff through. You'll see, if you look at the rest of the material, you'll see we do a lot of stuff with faculty now and curriculum and all those kinds of things. And Bonner's sort of the foundation of that, but not the end of it. So our annual meetings, Rich, I'll just cover this real quick and then,
Yeah.
Hold on a second, let me get my. So what we're gonna do this fall, rather than have a face-to-face meeting or rather than pack a whole bunch of meetings into a short amount of time, we're gonna do a webinar series for various audiences. We haven't worked out all the details. That's part of what, as a staff, we're gonna be doing. We have our fingers crossed, although we won't cross them for that long. We'll lose blood circulation. That's a dad joke. But it'd be nice if we could do a face-to-face in June. We do these meetings, our end of the year meetings on a campus If you don't want to stay in the dorm, you don't have to. You'll just be charged for the food. If you stay in the dorm, you'll be charged for the dorm. Last year when we did it, it was $210 each. That's 3 nights and part of 4 days. In higher ed terms, that's very inexpensive. This is the dates that Allegheny College can do it. They were slated to do it this past June. So those are the dates that are available. We'll see. We have plenty of time between now and then to worry about that. But that's kind of our meeting schedule. So we're going to switch to this other mode of working, and we'll roll those out. We'll roll those out. Maybe even survey you guys a little bit about what you will find most helpful. If you're a prospective school, again, I'll get back to you guys as a group, and maybe we'll organize a call or two as a group just to go through some questions, and then individually we can do whatever's helpful to you guys to think about it. Okay, Rachita, I'll go through the slides, but there's the first one.
Okay, well, yeah, we will go over this quickly, but we do, as you saw, we do have multiple platforms where we have tons of information. So the first one is our website. If you want to know the latest news about Bonners or upcoming meetings, then we suggest that you visit this page, which is bonner.org. Then the next one is Bonner Learning Community. This is more of a online community where you can post questions and share resources. And then the next one is Bonner Wiki, where we have repository of so many things, multiple documents. So the difference between Bonner Learning Community and Bonner Wiki is that Bonner Learning Community is more discussion based, and we have webinars, whereas Bonner Wiki, it's all the accumulation of documents. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bobby.
No, that's it.
Okay. And then social media, oh yes, and this is very important. We suggest that you subscribe to this Bonner Lister, and this is very helpful. You can ask very simple question like, hey, I'm attending Bonner Fall Directors Meeting and I need a ride from airport to the location. So is there anyone going and help me? So people can answer to that, or it can be program related question that, hey, I'm setting up a faculty learning community at my school and I need some resources, and people will be happy to share. So this is their group. Yeah.
I think we're gonna, if we're successful in getting the Bonner Learning Community to be really, everybody's on it and really using it, then I think we'll be able to drop this, because those questions will get posed here. The advantage is then we have these little topic folders where we can save things. So you can always tag something as fitting a certain topic. And so it's a richer environment for that kind of stuff. But we're not confident of that right now, that it's really had that. We've only been using this, it's called Mighty Networks as a platform, but we've only using it for this school year and only really ramped it up in a serious way in the spring. So it's still, we're learning the tools better. They're making some updates in the events section. The courses or the webinars have been, I think, really very helpful to us over the course of the spring and certainly this summer. So we'll see, but anybody who's actually in the network or whatever, I put you on this right away, and I'll invite you to the learning community as well if you're not already on it. So you'll hear about it. And those of you who are prospective, and let's say you decide this is not really what I want to do, or school doesn't really want us to do it. It doesn't mean you have to get off these things. You can hang around. We're fine.
So Bobby, we're on the listserv if you've put us on.
I should have, and I will double check.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. All right, so social media, go ahead, Rachita.
Okay, so this is our newest online platform where Bonner alums and current Bonner students collaborate with each other. So it's an online community just like Facebook. Staff members can also join this network, and they can serve as mentors to Bonner students and Bonner alums.
So the big feature here is that it's private. So all that mishigas with Facebook and all the other stuff and frankly, other distractions aren't happening. And it has not just a directory where we can find each other, which is huge, but a mentoring component. So anybody who's in there can offer to mentor somebody else. And they give you like, I don't know, 20 different levels or activities you could do as a mentor. Grab a cup of coffee, have a phone call, you know, do a shadowing day. It's not mentoring in a heavy duty way necessarily at all. And then they've added a jobs thing so people can announce, alumni can, or other people can announce that there's job openings that other people in our network can find. The goal for us, of course, is to get 20,000 people on here and have this be just a place where Bonners are, as a community, really finding each other and doing stuff together. It has a groups section as well. So what we're gradually rolling out is that individual schools, as they build their own Bonner alumni network within the school, will have a page, a section just for them. So they're part of the whole thing, but then they have one that they can do more intensive stuff with their group. So we're pretty excited about this. Arthur Tarty is the leader of it.
Yeah. So just to emphasize on the jobs part for Bonner Connect, many schools, a couple of months ago, we had openings and many schools posted their jobs here and students really use that. So staff members who haven't joined Bonner Connect yet, please go ahead and do that. It's really helpful. And then we have YouTube channels. So all the meetings that we have done, like the Bonner Summer Leadership Institute that we did online, the current one that we are running today, all those videos are being recorded. I mean, all the sessions are being recorded and then we post them on YouTube. So that's another way to provide online resources to schools in our network. And then all the presentations, we use SlideShare and we link them on Bonner Wiki so you have access to all these materials. And then we are also on LinkedIn, Bonner Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Snapchat. We use Bonner Facebook and Instagram more compared to Twitter and Snapchat. So those are some other ways to stay connected with us.
And I don't do any of those. But if you friend me, I'll accept your friendship and say yes, but you'll never see me post anything because I'm very shy. I'd like to show you that quick video. If Rachita, you found it?
Yeah, that link is in the chat. Do you want me to post the link again, maybe?
Yeah, I don't. Is it?
Because I
Oh
can't.
no, there it is. Here it is. Okay, yeah. I'm gonna pull this one up. Just because of all the videos of Bonner, as much as I love that funny one, this is actually literally my favorite. And the weird thing is this school decided to stop calling it the Bonner program and sort of faded out of the network. But I really like, you know, they're wonderful people. But this video for me conveys some of the key things about what Bonner is trying to do. And I'm gonna pull it up here. I'm gonna go big screen. And I hit play.
I'm from the Windy City. I'm from California.
I'm from the hidden hills of Southeast Asia.
I'm from a suburb.
I was the A honor roll student. I was a soccer player.
I was the child of
I was the chameleon.
I was raised by a single mother.
I'm the oldest. I was raised by both of my parents, but separately.
I am the baby.
Sometimes I don't identify with my own culture.
I'm Mexican. I am Mo.
My family loves Lessa.
I speak English.
Yo hablo español. Yo amo.
I speak English y Espanol.
I'm a Christian.
I go to church. I am agnostic.
I was raised in one of the largest Lutheran churches in America.
want to be an elementary teacher.
I study biopsychology. I am a science major.
I study political science and sociology.
I am passionate about youth development.
I'm passionate about homelessness. I am passionate about empowering the next generation.
I am passionate about creating a loving and accepting community.
I am a Bonner.
I am a Bonner. I am a Bonner.
I am a Bonner.
That gets me every time. I can't tell how many times I've seen that video. So the best thing about this is you get to hang out with those kind of students doing this kind of work. This is my favorite meeting in that I love having new people come in. And it's always good to have people who've been around in the room. So Val and Arlette, Jennifer was a student. But having new folks show up and sort of have their eyes get bigger and the sense of an invitation that you accept. Now, it doesn't always work out, right? You may not be able to get all the things to happen, and maybe, and that's always a shame at one level for us, but there's still this sense of sort of common cause that we have. And we define those around the common commitments, but it's even more than that, right? There's something sort of deeper inside of us that's sort of pulling us into this work, and that we're able to do it virtually like this and just keep moving has been a real pleasure. This size is a nice size in terms of just getting to see each other's faces and get a little inkling of your personalities and what you care about. So if I had a glass, I would tip my glass and say, well, I have a glass, but it's not wine or something. It's too early in the afternoon for that anyway. But listen, I really appreciate you guys going through all this. I look forward to hearing from you one way or another. If I haven't already, I'll double check to make sure you're on the Bonner staff listserv. If it doesn't work out, but you want to stay on the staff listserv, you're perfectly welcome to. And we'll just sort of figure out the next steps. Individually, everybody should feel very comfortable picking up the phone or shooting an email, whatever it is, set up a Zoom call with any of the staff at any time about anything. What I typically say at this meeting is we are, you know, in those office phones, there's the extensions, right? The different offices. So we're just one more button on that list. And if you think of it that way, then we have lots of little calls and big problems don't happen, or you feel like you really are getting that support. Half the time we'll say, oh, what you need to do is talk to Arlette. What you need to do is talk to, and pretty soon we'll be saying, hey, you got to call Clarence because Clarence got the right idea, or Sierra's got it figured out. So, so very good. Well, thanks everybody. I'll send an email to all the new folks, all the veterans. You'll be hearing from us anyway. Also the new folks, if you want to join that Tuesday, I don't know what we're going to do during the school year. We haven't sorted that out yet, but we have a Tuesday 3 o'clock standing Zoom call. We'll probably do a couple more, and then we'll have to sort of figure out what makes sense for folks. But you're also welcome to just pop in on that as well.
Can you send an invite for that we can?
Yeah, I'll put it on the weekly, so you'll see it on the staff listserv.
Cool.
All right, cool. All right, be well, everybody.